Welcome to Infinite Business Dynamics, Strategy, Thinking, Execution and Value. Today, what is strategy? Chandler, Porter, and Mintzberg explained.
We throw the word strategy around all the time, right? For business, for sports, even just planning a weekend. But what does it really mean? Well, it's way more than just a buzzword or some to-do list. It's honestly one of the most powerful tools for success there is. And to really get our heads around it, we're going to learn from three of the absolute giants in the field: Chandler, Porter, and Mintzberg. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the absolute fundamentals. Then we'll dig into the big questions that every good strategy has to answer. We'll explore the classic definitions from the masters, see how this all applies outside the corporate world, sharpen our thinking with some really key distinctions, and finally, see how it all comes together in practice. All right, let's jump right in. Okay, first things first. Before we can get into the fancy stuff, we need to build a really solid foundation. So let's lock in a clear definition and get the basic grammar of strategy down pat. So what is strategy at its core? I want you to think of it like the master blueprint for a giant skyscraper. It's not just about deciding, hey, let's build it tall. No, it's about making those tough, deliberate choices about the foundation, the materials, the whole design, especially when you know you can't predict every storm or earthquake. The really critical idea here is that strategy is a system of choices. It makes sure every single piece, from the rebar deep in the foundation to the antenna on the roof, works together perfectly to create something strong, valuable, and truly built to last. A great strategy gives you clear, solid answers to 5 essential questions. First, why do we even exist? That's your purpose. What are we trying to achieve? Those are your goals. Where are we going to compete? That's your playing field. And when and who, that covers your timing and the people you need. But honestly, the absolute heart of it all, the thing that makes everything else tick, is the how. That how, your unique, distinctive way to win in your chosen field, that's what separates a real strategy from just a wish list. Now, we hear terms like vision, mission, and business model all the time, and it's easy to think that they are the strategy. But they're not. They are absolutely critical, for sure. They're like the ingredients for a great meal. They set the destination and provide the basic logic. But strategy? Strategy is the recipe itself. It's the connective tissue, the instructions that bind all of those amazing ingredients together into a coherent plan of action that will actually get you where you want to go. All right, let's meet the pioneers. These are the thinkers who literally built the foundations of modern strategic thinking. They gave us the language and the frameworks that we still rely on every single day. First up, we've got Alfred Chandler, who wrote his definition way back in 1962. For him, it was simple. Strategy is all about setting your long-term goals and then figuring out how to get the resources you need to hit them. But his most powerful, most game-changing insight was this one little phrase: structure follows strategy. Think about that. It means you don't try to cram your brilliant strategy into your existing company structure. No way. You design and build your organization to perfectly serve your strategy. That is a massive shift in thinking. Now, let's jump forward to the legend himself, Michael Porter. He came along and said, look, strategy isn't about trying to be the best at what everyone else is doing. It's about being unique. It's about carving out a special place in the market by doing things differently than your competitors. And that means making hard choices, what he famously called trade-offs, deciding what you are not going to do. And he delivered this absolute knockout punch of an idea. Operational effectiveness is not strategy. Just being efficient? That's the price of admission. That's just table stakes. Real strategy is about choosing to play a different game entirely. Then along came Henry Mintzberg, who just blew the doors off the idea that strategy is just some formal plan written down in a binder. His famous 5 Ps show us it's so much richer than that. Strategy can be a ploy, a clever move to outsmart a competitor. It can be a pattern. Think about a company that just has legendary customer service. That's a pattern of behavior, whether it's written down or not. It's also a position in the market and a perspective, that shared worldview inside your organization. This just brilliantly shows that strategy is a living, breathing thing that you can see from all these different angles. So you might be wondering, does all this stuff that was born in the corporate world actually apply to, say, government or nonprofits? The answer is yes, absolutely, with a few really important adjustments. The core ideas of making choices and aligning your organization, totally universal. But in the public sector, your goal isn't profit, it's creating public value. And instead of a competitive market, you're dealing with a really complex world of stakeholders, politics, and a massive focus on accountability. The how is still critical, but the why is fundamentally different. Okay, with that foundation in place, let's get even sharper. Because understanding these next few distinctions is what really separates the casual observers from the true strategic thinkers. It is so easy to get strategy, tactics, and planning mixed up. Let's use a quick chess analogy to clear it up. Your strategy is your overall game plan for winning. I will control the center of the board. A tactic is a specific move you make to execute that plan, like moving a knight to threaten a queen. And planning, well, that's the mental work of analyzing all the possible moves and countermoves. The key is your strategy, the why, is what guides every single tactic you choose. And that brings us to another huge idea. See, strategy doesn't always come down from on high in some big formal plan. We call that deliberate strategy, what you intended to do. But the real world is messy, right? Emergent strategy is what bubbles up from the front lines as people adapt, innovate, and learn. The strategy you actually end up with is almost always this dynamic mix of your original plan and all the unexpected opportunities and challenges you run into along the way.
So what does all this theory actually look like inside a real organization? Let's take a look at the blueprint for how strategy gets put into practice, from the executive suite all the way down to the front line.
The easiest way to think about this is like a cascade. Strategy operates on 3 different levels. At the very top, you have corporate or policy strategy. This answers the biggest question of all: what businesses or missions should we be in? Then, one level down, you have business or agency strategy, which asks, okay, how are we going to win in this specific area? And finally, at the foundation, you have functional strategy. This is where departments like marketing or finance or IT ask, how do we best support that winning plan?
And this is why those levels are so important. To create anything of real, sustainable value, you need ruthless alignment across all 3. When your corporate goals, your business level choices, and your day-to-day functional work are all perfectly in sync, when everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet, the result is incredible power and focus. But when they're out of sync, all you get is friction, wasted energy, and disappointing results, no matter how smart any one part of the plan is.
Whew, we have covered a ton of ground. So now let's boil it all down to the absolute essential takeaways that you can really lock in and remember.
Okay, here are the 5 big ideas to take with you. Number 1, strategy is all about making choices, especially when you don't have all the answers. 2, it's not about being the best, it's about being unique. Your how and the things you choose not to do are what define you. 3, real-world strategy is always a blend of your deliberate plans and what you learn along the way. 4, vision and mission, they're critical inputs to your strategy. They're not the strategy itself. And number 5, alignment across all levels isn't just a nice to have. It is the absolute secret to sustainable success.
And of course, the world of strategy doesn't stand still. The conversation today is evolving fast. There's a huge emphasis now on adaptability, on being able to thrive in really chaotic environments. There's a focus on creating value for all stakeholders, not just shareholders, and it's all about building organizations that are resilient and dynamic enough to handle constant change.
So if you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this. Strategy is not a static document that you write and then stick in a drawer. It's a living, breathing, dynamic system of choices that you and your team make every single day. It's all about adapting, learning, and constantly asking, how do we create unique value in a world that just never, ever stops changing? I really hope this explainer helped give you a clearer lens on what strategy is and how you can use it. If you found it valuable, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I'm really curious to know, what's the biggest strategic challenge that you're facing right now? Let me know down in the comments. I truly love hearing from you all. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Learning reinforcement.
Look at standard corporate documentation, and you will usually find a vision, a mission, a business model, and an operational plan. As you can see here, none of these are strategy. Organizations routinely confuse their aspirations and daily operations with strategic choice. When you strip away the mission statements and the goal-setting exercises, you are left with deep uncertainty. Strategy is not a static document sitting on a shelf. It is the active, connective tissue of an organization that navigates this exact space. Strategy is the mechanism used to make deliberate choices under uncertainty. It ensures that an organization's resources and capabilities are aligned toward a specific long-term goal. To understand how this works, we are going to construct a complete model of strategic action. We will define its core questions, synthesize the classic theories that govern it, and map exactly how choices flow through an organization. When this connective tissue is missing, an organization's resources and goals often drift apart, leaving it unable to respond to a changing environment. This diagram illustrates 5 distinct pillars rising from our blueprint. Every strategy must answer these 5 essential questions to establish its coordinates in an uncertain environment. Why defines the organization's purpose and overarching aspiration? What defines the concrete goals and the exact scope of the operation? Where defines the specific arena and markets you compete in? When and who define the timeline and the precise organizational capabilities required to execute? That leaves the final question: how? This is the core domain where strategy actually lives. It represents the distinctive way an organization chooses to win or create superior value. A vision dictates the destination, and goals measure the progress. But the how is the mechanism that determines how an organization maintains its position while navigating competition or public demands. To clearly define strategy, we must first build a boundary around it by separating it from analytical planning and daily execution. On the left side of this comparative animation, we see planning visualized as a linear Gantt chart. Planning is a formal analytical process. It focuses on projecting known variables into the future to create a schedule of events. Tactics are the specific short-term actions and day-to-day execution required to keep an organization moving. They are the gears grinding below the schedule. On the right side, we see true strategy. It relies on synthesis, intuition, and adaptation to respond effectively to unknown, emerging variables that a fixed plan cannot anticipate. Planning prepares for what it expects. Tactics execute the immediate work. Strategy navigates uncertainty between the two. In 1962, management theorist Alfred Chandler authored the first modern pillar of strategic thought, defining how choices translate into physical operations. Chandler defines strategy as the determination of basic long-term goals, combined with the adoption of action courses to allocate resources to those goals. Here, you can see abstract raw resources sliding into highly specific, organized formations along a timeline. This leads directly to Chandler's lasting axiom: structure follows strategy. The physical shape of the organization is entirely dependent on its resource allocation plan. The practical consequence of this rule is severe. An organization cannot rationally design its departments or hire its people until it knows exactly what long-term goal it is trying to achieve. Chandler established that strategy is the explicit blueprint that dictates the physical shape of the entire organization. Decades later, Michael Porter introduced a second pillar of strategic thought, imposing rigid constraints regarding competitive positioning. Writing in 1996, Porter defined strategy as the creation of a unique and valuable position involving a completely different set of activities than your competitors. This requires strict discipline.
Porter's most critical rule is the necessity of deliberate trade-offs. As this boundary line demonstrates, strategy requires choosing what not to do. You must deliberately block off alternative paths to protect your core position. This is why simply doing the same things better or faster than your rivals is not a strategy. That is operational effectiveness. Rivals can easily imitate a faster process. They cannot easily imitate a tightly constrained, coherent system of unique activities. Without specific trade-offs, a strategy lacks the focus required to create a unique position. But perfect plans and rigid constraints eventually collide with reality. To solve this flaw, Henry Mintzberg introduced behavioral realism to strategic theory. Mintzberg mapped out 5 different lenses for viewing organizational behavior over time, known as the 5 Ps of strategy. These include plan, the intended course of action; ploy, a specific maneuver against rivals; pattern, a consistency in behavior; position, a location in the environment; and perspective, the shared way an organization perceives the world. This model illustrates Mintzberg's critical distinction. The solid line represents deliberate strategy, what leaders plan in advance. When it strikes an immovable obstacle, a dotted line forms. This is emergent strategy. It arises naturally from on-the-ground responses to unfolding, unpredictable situations. The strategy an organization actually ends up executing, the realized strategy, is almost always a mixture of both deliberate intention and emergent adaptation. Mintzberg proved that true strategy cannot be a rigid doctrine. It must possess the elasticity to absorb reality. To execute Chandler's structure, Porter's trade-offs, and Mintzberg's adaptability simultaneously,
strategy must operate across 3 interconnected organizational strata. This 3D model shows exactly where strategy physically lives. The top tier is the corporate or policy level. Strategy here answers what overarching priorities or businesses the organization should focus on. The middle tier is the business or agency level. This answers exactly how the organization will win or create distinct value in its chosen arena. The bottom tier is the functional level. Strategy here answers how specific departments and operational teams support the layers above them. Strategy is fractal. It exists at every level of the organization, continuously answering the how question, even as the scope of the choices changes. Sustainable value is mechanically dependent on vertical alignment. As this beam illustrates, the corporate, business, and functional layers must be locked together perfectly. The goals at the top must translate seamlessly into the daily actions at the bottom. Misalignment at any level degrades performance in any industry. Yet this architectural model applies equally to private markets and public service. The left model represents the private sector, securing competitive advantage. The right represents the public sector, delivering public value. In the public sector, the goal is not market share. Instead, strategy must navigate complex political environments and multi-stakeholder demands to deliver societal outcomes and equity. The mechanics of strategic choice remain identical across both domains. Only the definition of winning changes. Modern strategy requires synthesizing these first principles into a single machine. You need Chandler's structural alignment, Porter's trade-offs, and Mintzberg's adaptability, all calibrating in real time. Strategy is a living, coherent system of decisions designed to create sustainable value under constant uncertainty. Look at your own organization. Are you working in the public or private sector? And what specific strategic challenge are you currently navigating? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications to join us for more insights into infinite business dynamics. See you in the next episode.